And so now we're shifting to that second objective, summarize the history of the development of the idea of ultimate reality in Western philosophy. So we're starting with these three: Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes, and they've given their answers. And then we get into others. So there's this problem of change. So Heraclitus, which you may have heard, like he's the one who says you can't step into the same river twice, that he's saying permanence is an illusion. Change is what constitutes the nature of the universe. And he's often interpreted as saying that fire is the ultimate reality, but it may be better to say it's not fire, but fire kind of represents flux, this change, that everything is changing. So that's kind of Heraclitus's view. And then Parmenides will say, well, how can fire become water and earth? To say that it was at one time fire and then at another time water or earth is to say that it is something at one point and it's not that. So say that something is and is not, and that's a contradiction. And Parmenides will say being is unchangeable, immovable, eternal. That is the real world. What we see, what looks like change, that's just an illusion. It's just your opinion. It's an appearance. Since if there is any being, then everything is being, because it can't be and not be, because that's a contradiction. So he's, there's this very logical approach now that, well, logically it can't be and not be this. And then the atomists come and they'll agree that, okay, absolute change is impossible, reality is permanent, indestructible, unchangeable. But since we clearly see changes happening, we have to say that there is being and non-being. So they'll say, okay, there's this real continuous, there's this real thing, but it's not that continuous, undivided, immovable thing that Parmenides was saying. Rather, it's this infinite number of beings that we'll call atoms, and they're separated from each other by empty spaces. So there are atoms that are the building blocks of reality and space that they can move in. And so that's the first kind of atomic theory. But this idea, the problem of change and whether change is possible or illusory, is going to have these profound ripples for the history of philosophy and civilization. So that's the backdrop for Plato and Aristotle. So Plato's going to say, well, ultimate reality is forms. And it's also the backdrop for Aristotle, and his counterproposal is that ultimate reality is primary substances. So we'll take a little dive into that. So here are these two. So as we're talking about this history of the development of idea of ultimate reality in ancient Western philosophy, we started with these Milesians, Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes, Heraclitus, Parmenides, the atomists, and then we get to Plato and Aristotle, and they have these robust systematic theories of what ultimate reality is. So Plato and Aristotle, and they're responding to these same questions, and they'll each build systematic philosophies that are informed by their responses to this question of change. How is change possible? And Plato will say that the way we can explain change is through reference to forms that are eternal and unchanging. If something is beautiful, it's because it participates in the form of beauty. So if I say, oh, the mountain is beautiful, a person is beautiful, a car is beautiful, a city is beautiful, how does that have meaning? And Plato will say, well, they're all participating in this form of beauty. And that participation is what gives meaning to saying anything is beautiful. And it's the only reason, it's the only justification for saying anything is beautiful, is because we recognize it's participating in this form of beauty. And another example would be a circle. None of us have ever seen a perfect circle, but there's this form of a perfect circle. And whenever we recognize anything as circular, we recognize it because we recognize it's participating in this ultimate form of circle. So for Plato, ultimate reality is in these eternal, unchanging, substantial, real forms. And the material world is real only insofar as it participates in these transcendent forms. Okay, so there's Plato's philosophy and his ultimate reality. And then Aristotle is going to take the opposite tack. So instead of appealing to these transcendent, abstract entities as the explanation for anything, Aristotle is going to say that the ultimate reality is each concrete individual thing. So a primary substance is an individual. It's Carrie, it's Patrick, it's me, it's Claire, it's this table, it's this cinnamon roll. And Aristotle will argue that the forms aren't separate from things, but they're in them. So he'll argue that the form and matter are eternally together. And the world of sense, the phenomenal world, the world we experience, is not an imitation. It's not participating in this transcendent realm. This world is the real world, and it's justified. This is the appropriate object of science. This is the appropriate object of knowledge. And the ultimate reality are these primary substances. Again, you, me, this tree, this sandwich. And the key characteristic of a primary substance is that it can change. So I can be asleep and later I can be awake, or I can be hungry and then full. So this is the key characteristic of primary substances, is that they can change. And the essence or true nature of a particular concrete being is constituted by its form. So a tree may start as a seed and then become a sapling and then become a full-blown tree, but it's never going to go from a seed to a sapling to a dog, because the form of the tree is going to dictate what it can be. Okay, so these are the two frameworks, Plato and Aristotle, and they'll shape civilization thereafter. So that's a summary of the history of the development of the idea of ultimate reality in ancient Western philosophy. We went from the idea of different elements, water, air, fire, apiron, to change and being, to atoms, and these two systematic theories. And that's kind of how that idea of ultimate reality developed in ancient Western philosophy.